permis de mettre en lumière certains faits stylisés qui pourront aider dans les prochaines années à élaborer des politiques beaucoup plus fines et beaucoup plus ciblées pour ce commerce transfrontalier. Évidemment, je n'en citerai pas peut-être beaucoup, mais on peut noter tout simplement que ce secteur, surtout le commerce transfrontalier, est orienté vers la satisfaction de la demande des biens domestiques et il résiste mieux au choc relativement au commerce formel. Et il permet aussi d'écouler à la fois des produits bruts et des produits transformés. Et c'est une activité aussi qui est essentiellement tenue par les femmes et les jeunes. Mais ce commerce aussi enregistre de plus en plus d'acteurs et ce qui fait penser à une véritable opportunité qui n'est pas encore saisie dans les politiques d'intégration jusque-là. Mais si le secteur, surtout les États ou les décideurs s'en méfient, mais c'est surtout parce que les importations du commerce transfrontalier représentent, on peut dire, une concurrence déloyale pour les industries qui sont en place et aussi dans une moindre mesure du fait de sa faible productivité comparativement au secteur formel. Mais dans l'exercice que nous menons aujourd'hui, repenser l'intégration régionale en Afrique, force est de constater que dans toutes les communautés économiques régionales, les échanges frontaliers, même à petite échelle, ont un impact significatif sur les conditions de vie des ménages qui s'y engagent. Donc cela nous interpelle et la question est donc de savoir comment développer une attitude proactive qui va permettre de faciliter et d'encadrer ce commerce transfrontalier qui est florissant. Et c'est à cette question que nous allons chercher à répondre dans notre prochaine intervention. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. We are going to move on to the political economy question that deals with costs, benefits of regional integration, explaining the apparent inertia by countries to open up their markets. What potential market integration ramifications do you think are stumbling blocks to deeper integration? And this is a question we are directing to the Deputy Governor, Bank of South Sudan. Some 2 minutes, please, with an opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dier Tong. I'm Deputy Governor of Bank of South Sudan. I want to be generous with my 2 minutes also to thank the AERC for organizing this informative conference, really, because for me this is the first time I attend this type of conferences, and I think it is very useful. So I want to thank them and also the partners, the Bank of Uganda. I think during yesterday and of course today, we have discussed a lot, about regional integration. And from what we have heard, almost regional integration has become, a model. Almost every country in the world is a member of one or at least two, including my country, South Sudan, which is the youngest country in the world. We are a member of one, at least. So it shows, that there is a trend for this. Also, regional integration, of course, from the studies that have been made, it's obvious that there are benefits and also there are costs for that. And I think the question that is directed to me falls within this dilemma between the costs and benefits that we get from regional integration initiatives, because if they are not well explained, the synergies that come out of it, one can get lost somewhere. And for me, the key factor, I think, that is contributing to this in Africa, in the African context in particular, is the lack of civic engagement. When you see the talks about regional integration in Africa, it is almost left, to the elites they are the ones that decide everything. I think yesterday here we listened to our friend from the Farmers Association in Uganda here. I have my case in South Sudan when we applied for the membership of East African community, for example. Almost even at our level, who are called here, to be policy makers, so many people would not know anything about it, leave alone the general public. And therefore, when there is a lack of these people understanding the costs and benefits that comes out from this, definitely anything that will come up, will cause problems. So for me, I think we can learn from other regions. You take the European Union, for example. I spent some time in Ireland, and you would see there all this referendum coming up. When the referendum come up on these particular areas, there's a chance, for at least those who are supporting such initiatives to make some efforts, so that they engage the population, so that they can understand at least what this thing means. They can participate through their voting for the adoption of this particular kind of program. And therefore, there's a lock-in. There is a buy-in in terms of somebody who has supported this. And I think we need those initiatives. I think in the future to see how can we more involve the civic our people, the general public in the process of regional integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. We are going to move on to another area. He has touched on it. This is the issue of the overlapping membership. Some people call it a spaghetti. I think Governor Maruping is the best positioned to address this issue. Does it raise compliance costs? What policies or policy steps are required for Africa to move to the continental? And how can knowledge institutions such as AERC support this policy initiative? So Governor Maruping, please, some 2-3 minutes of an opening statement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair and Moderator. Let's go Italian, spaghetti. No, there are multiple memberships, so overlapping memberships. But countries are in those because they derive something from each of those groupings, and that's why they are in there. And they see the cost implied worthwhile, that it's worth paying that price to stay in. The benefits more than the costs. So even fiscal strains, of course, they do make compliance difficult, but they find it worthwhile to stay on. We have examples. Tanzania, at one time, I think maybe they still do, belong to all three, COMESA, EAC, and SADC, because there are benefits in all three. Swaziland stuck with COMESA and SADC, Mauritius, SADC, and COMESA, because of the benefits that they get. So persuasion to try to say you have to make a choice, it does not work very well, because really the countries that are doing that are benefiting from that situation. And overlapping memberships tend to put brakes on the progress towards deepening integration, because you can move from preferential trade area to free trade area without any problem with multiple. But when you get to customs union, where you have common external tariff and other requirements, then it becomes very complicated. So what is the way out? The way out is measures, and Abuja Treaty and Lagos of Plan of Action recognized this a long time ago, that the rights are building blocks, but eventually they should come together, merge, and hence that's why, as a start towards that, there is tripartite between East African Community, COMESA, and SADC. But progress again after agreements and spotless agreements, implementation is very slow. It's very slow. Of course, some of the giants in there are dragging their feet. I could say more on that, but maybe I'll hold back. But then the African Union, through Agenda 2063, first 10-year implementation plan, one of the fast-track efforts is the Continental Free Trade Area. And that is being signed in Kigali on the 21st of this month. It's quite comprehensive. A lot of consultations have been made. But again, it will be an agreement, and the question of implementation, the pace of and the quality of implementation will definitely be the challenge. So always the question of the quality and pace of implementation is always a challenge that has to be faced. So frameworks to ease out of multiple, they do exist, but the challenge is always to implement. The quality and pace is always the problem. The AERC can assist with advising on implementation, on that question of change management, how to move from where we are now to where is desirable. So I'll stop here, Chair, for now. Thank you.
Ross, make your opening statement. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just start with the 3 key areas. I come from an institution that is mandated to support the government in coming up with policies that can be implemented. And as a government think tank, there are several issues that we also struggle with. And I think at this time that's what I want to really bring out for us to see the way forward, even in terms of the research work. From yesterday, we have come up with several issues, processes that can be put up in the integration, in achieving integration, outcomes that are desired by all of us. Growth is one of the issues, development, productivity, industrialization, and all these concepts, you'll find them in what we call our visions. Vision 2030, Vision 2060, Vision 20, everything. But the key point I'm trying to raise here is how do we balance our desired outcomes and the processes that we need to go through. Take, for example, industrialization is a key area we think we can move on with. But can we industrialize, for example, by having Africa as a second-hand market for cars, for clothing, and the like? How can we leverage our textile industries and even to come up with very strong value chains that can spread across the various countries? If we don't think about the kind of strategy that can take us there. 2, we've talked about the interests, which could be internal and also external. In the morning, we had one of the comments about the mini hubs. Each country wants to be a hub of ICT, a hub of health, a hub of air travel, a hub of financial services, and everything at the same time. How do we identify our competitive advantages in mapping out the process of integration in the region, and who should drive it? Is it the AU? I am aware that in most of our countries, as we look at the AU 2063, we try to mainstream it, and so do we do for SDGs and the like. But as we talk about maybe buying Uganda, buying Kenya, buying Malawi, buying everybody, at internal level, how do we achieve the external goal that we all want to deal with? And finally is the issue of commitments, political will, external forces, and remaining very strategic. I know my colleague has talked about issues of spaghetti, but I still want to bring out this aspect again. East Africa Community, different level. COMESA, a different level. SADC, a different level. Now we have the CFTA. We are pushing. Again, at a very different level. We also have the regional integration agreements that are coming up, where Africa features almost negligibly. Where should we put our efforts? Should we put now our efforts at CFTA? And what do we do with the other initiatives that are following up? Should we, yesterday we were talking about consolidating what has been the efforts gained, or where do we move from there? Thank you, Chair. Good.
However, for me, being a women activist and a gender specialist, reflecting on all the presentations over the past 2 days, a question has come to my mind. The major gap in all the presentations, where are the voices of the women? And when we take into consideration the SDG that say leave no one behind, my consideration is, with 50% of the world's population and Africa population not being captured in the dialogue that went on from yesterday, it leaves more to be desired. In terms of rethinking policies for Africa, we can no longer leave the women behind. Women are involved in several issues, including cross-border trade, farming, and industrialization. However, they need to be pushed in order to assist their male counterparts, ensure that Africa become a viable continent that will be productive and educated, a continent that will strengthen its deliverables if we must contest with all the other 5 continents of the world. So for us, we believe that in rewriting or rethinking the strategy, a couple of things need to be taken into consideration. One, you have UN Resolution 1325 and all its subsidiaries resolutions. Those resolutions need to be captured in the final outcome of our discussion. You also, if I want to be blunt with the men in this room, there is a convention that is called the CEDAW, which is the Convention for Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. I believe that all our presentations in the past few days have discriminated against us as women, and there is a need to take the CEDAW into consideration, as well as the African Protocol on Women's Rights. So, in terms of infrastructure, what mechanism do we need to put in place for security measures as far as women involved in cross-border trade? Because it is a known fact that sexual gender-based violence as well as coercion towards sexual exploitation is a key among women who are involved in cross-border trade. Additionally, protection for these women are necessary, and mechanism needs to be put in place. There are a lot of women who want to be part of science and industry as well as industrialization, but they do not have the requisite push to be able to get the training necessary. So as we rethink, the financial capacity of women needs to be taken into strong consideration, and in rewriting the policy that will guide Africa forward. We do believe that capturing the necessary conventions and instruments that will empower women to be an active participant in policies is cardinal to our coexistence. Let me say to our male colleague in the room, this is not an affront to you, but rather to say, get us on board. Thank you.
There's gender balance on the panel. Okay. We have Speciosa. Make your pick from either the questions or something else that has been raised. Please, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I will respond to the first question, which asks, Africa is yet to fully exploit the benefits of intra-Africa region. And the question also asks, what are the constraints? So in response to this question, I would like to use the example of Tanzania Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture, which is mandated by the government on the issuance of certificates of origin. These are instruments for intra-trade. Now, looking at the statistics of the issuance of certificates of origin, we find that in Tanzania, it is trading more with Europe, with Asia, with AGOA, with East Africa Community, and SADC, and of course other countries like Middle East. Now, Tanzania is a member of EAC and is a member of SADC. So we see there is transactions, trade integration between the two regional economic blocks. And apart from that, we have other outside the African continent. What does this mean now? Countries like West Africa, Central Africa, and the rest of Africa, we don't have much any trading activities with them. So to me, I look at it, I look also on the issue of who are these trading or business traders in Tanzania. So most of those who are trading are large businesses. So then with this, you see that the issue is related with the MSMEs. We don't have many MSMEs integrating with other countries, regardless the continent where they are transacting their businesses. So now coming to look at the challenges, why the MSMEs are not doing businesses, are not doing businesses with other countries within the continent or outside the continent. From the today presentation on the services trade, I look at there are issues, more issues concerning the MSMEs. The cost of meeting the services, for instance, finance. Finance is key to make any business person to engage in trading. So these businesses which lack access to finance. So therefore, the issue of services is an issue for MSME to trade. Intra-Africa trade or across Africa countries. Okay, with that, let me conclude by saying that looking at the SADC and the EAC, there is more trade which Tanzania is doing. Now, to me, I look at it being a member of
of any economic trade, it is very, very relevant to promote the intra-trade in Africa and outside Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm going to pick out some themes from these. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to pick up some themes, and I'll leave the panelists to come in. This issue of production and placing emphasis on manufacturing production as a basis for intra-African trade, I think needs to be interrogated further. From the charts we saw this morning, manufacturing has been, in most cases, flat as a ratio of GDP. If anything, we saw that it was services as a ratio of GDP that is going up. So it's been interesting that two of the panelists have placed emphasis on manufacturing production, or the production side, as a means to promoting intra-African trade. And two, Rose has brought back this famous issue of comparative advantage, coming back to map out the process of integration. She just reminded me of what we used to do in the East African community of the 60s, where we had mapped out certain industries to be located in certain countries on the basis of, I think maybe more of political choices, not comparative advantage. But let me push that back to the panel. This issue of production, where we focus on production as a means to promoting intra-African trade. Anybody who wants to go on that particular issue? Yes.
Yeah, I think the promoting technologies. I think maybe the starting point would be to think of the constraints to integration as falling in two broad categories. One has to do with removing, or rather, removing those constraints which you might consider as, no, let me put it this way. There are things which are necessary for integration. Certain things must take place because they are necessary. But then there are also other things which are sufficient for integration. If you look at reduction or removal of tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, improving road network, infrastructure, and so on, these things are necessary for integration because it's allowing certain things to flow, goods to flow. Now, if you don't have goods, what is going to flow? What are you going to trade if you don't have what, you haven't produced what needs to be traded? That's the whole starting point. I do realize that progressively you will move from trading, from manufacturing into the service sector, but we haven't even been able to manufacture the basic things. Where we are right now, if you take a country like Zambia, we're exactly where we were at the time of independence. We produce bars of copper. After we've done all the hard work, we put the bar of copper on a truck and it goes out of the country because we don't know what to do with it. Now, you cannot promote integration along those lines. And if you look at the composition, the export product basket composition for most of these countries, it has remained exactly the same. We continue to produce the things which we don't need to trade with each other. So for me, the basic element here, for me, the sufficiency has to do with the capacity to produce goods that other people need to buy from you.
Okay. Now, how do we address the internal contradictions? You want to promote manufacturing of textiles, but at the same time you are importing second-hand clothes. There are all these internal contradictions that we have, that you see in government policies. Who will take a lead in terms of eliminating this internal contradiction? And who is going to promote the manufacturing? Is it going to have, I know some people have recommended some state support, choosing winners by governments. I think we need to drill further into this issue of promoting production so that it can underlie. Yes, Ambassador.
Hello. Yes. I think as a diplomat, I think I should highlight something here, because when I look at the rhetorics in Germany, in Europe, as compared to the rhetorics here, I think one should understand that they are totally different. Here we are talking about integration of Africa, about production, but who are the deciders? Who are the people? What are the institutions which are taking decisions for Africa? What are the institutions which are designing the African strategy? This is something very important that we have to look at. Now in Germany, for example, I'm just wearing my cap as ambassador here. When I go to the forum, the main problem of Germany today, even in Europe today, is the problem of refugees, the problem of China going to Africa, India going to Africa. Everywhere I go, they speak the same thing. And now Germany has come forward with a Marshall Plan, okay, with a lot of initiatives in order to conquer Africa. Now Germany is making African countries competing among themselves. I can see my African friends, ambassadors like me. We are all competing to get investors from Germany to come to Mauritius or elsewhere in Africa. And as you know, there are a few countries in Africa where Volkswagen is already there today. They are coming with a training center in Kenya. They are coming with a one spare part Volkswagen in Kenya. They are choosing 4 or 5 countries, making African countries compete, so which is back to square one. I think the main thing is we have to decide once for all, okay, who is going to decide the future of Africa. And this is when we would be able to decide what type of production should we go into manufacturing or should we go into servicing, what type of production should we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Maybe Governor Maruping will help us. Do you see a role for the AU helping us map out certain processes that are going to promote production in certain corridors? And these, in an environment where we never respect what we have signed. Governor Marupi.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. First of all, I want to go back very briefly to your first question. That it's not just industrial. I think the appropriate word there is diversification. If you diversify, then you lay ground for more integration, because then there will be scope for trade in all those. Then I come to this one of what is AU doing? Well, AU has done something in consultation with stakeholders. They have produced African Agenda 2063, which we also see as an instrument for implementing sustainable development goals, and going a little bit more because it's broader in scope. And a second, the trouble, again in consultation with stakeholders, of preparing first 10-year implementation plan. Even this CFTA, which is going to be signed in Kigali on the 21st, is the result of 13 flagship fast-track projects or programs that have to be carried out, because the implementation is already going on. Last year we were in Mauritius for economic platform, where you have government, civil society, academia, and the private sector discussing issues. It was the first one, but it was very useful, and there will be a second one this year, later this year. There is commodity strategy as one of those 13. And this commodity strategy has to do with diversification. You saw that Zambia doesn't send copper out because they don't know what to do with it. They will know what to do with it if they follow that first 10-year implementation plan.
It was the first
So,
one, but it was very useful, and there will be a second one this year, later this year. There is commodity strategy as one of those 13. And this commodity strategy has to do with diversification.
you saw that Zambia doesn't send copper out because they don't know what to do with it. They will know what to do with it if they follow that first 10-year implementation plan. So it has done its job. There is a framework there that is being pursued, and we hope if we do it, we always have spotless documents, faultless. And when you read it, it reduces you to tears. It's perfect. Everything is there. But the problem is doing it. Implementation. Moving from where we are to where we want to be. And so that's where our efforts should be concentrated. Change management.
Thank you. Yes, Yo.
Merci.
À la question de savoir est-ce que nous opérons suivant nos avantages comparatifs et est-ce que nous avons suffisamment fait pour promouvoir la production manufacturière. Si on analyse la réponse du secteur formel, bien évidemment la réponse est non, puisque le secteur formel est incapable d'entretenir des réseaux d'échange assez performants. Si nous regardons les importations et les exportations du continent, et en termes de compétitivité, ça soulève la question de l'intégration même régionale et l'intégration aux chaînes de valeur mondiales. Mais le secteur informel, lui, il n'est pas resté inerte. Il essaie d'apporter des réponses, quand bien même il a une productivité relativement faible. Donc, comme je le disais en introduction, le commerce transfrontalier essaie de satisfaire la demande locale. Et puisque cette demande locale existe tant en biens manufacturés qu'en biens en matière première, bien sûr qu'on se retrouve avec des réseaux qui permettent d'écouler des produits manufacturés, que ces produits soient fabriqués en Afrique ou fabriqués ailleurs. Donc là, on peut regarder les échanges transfrontaliers dans la zone de l'Afrique centrale. Évidemment, il y a des analyses qui montrent bien que certains produits en provenance de l'Amérique latine, ils sont écoulés. On regarde même en Afrique de l'Ouest, même dans la zone CEDEAO, vous avez des produits en provenance d'Europe qui sont écoulés. Mais bien entendu, ce qui voudrait dire que si ces produits sont écoulés, c'est vrai qu'ils sont peut-être compétitifs, mais c'est parce qu'il n'y a pas de réponse au plan national concernant le secteur formel pour essayer de capter cette part du marché. Donc, bien entendu, le secteur informel, il se remonte un peu dynamique, mais on peut bien constater qu'il est limité parce que sa productivité elle-même est limitée. Et compte tenu des tracasseries au niveau des frontières, bien entendu, les coûts aussi sont relativement élevés pour que ce secteur puisse prospérer en toute tranquillité. Merci.
Well, thanks a lot. I think we were trying also to address the whole issue of the multiplier effects, and I can see that the audience wants to come in on some of these issues under hot pursuit. So I think, can I recognize Governor Caleb? I think you want to come in and engage on this particular issue.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to just make a few comments. Listening to, obviously there are a lot of very useful ideas we have received here. But recently there has been a debate in Zambia commenting on our late President, Michael Sata. I think he made a statement that Africa has been let down by its educated people. You know, we are the people who should provide solutions, but mostly we can't. And when we try to find solutions, they are so complicated that nobody can benefit from them. That is partly one of our biggest problems. But I also want to pick it up from what Madam Graves said, that the voiceless, the issue of the voiceless. In fact, a few years back when we were in Abidjan, my wife was doing a project called Integrating Africa from the Grassroots. Because those of you who have seen what is happening in West Africa, women moving from country to country trading. They know what is tradable across the border. But the biggest problem these traders were facing was that the customs people were always confiscating this. Instead of learning from what can be sold across the border, we see them as committing offenses. I experienced a similar problem when I was on the board of the Zambia Revenue Authority. I went to the Zambia-Malawi border, and although we were part of the SADC as well as COMESA, people were going to Malawi to buy something from southern bottlers, and technically they were not supposed to pay any duty on those things. But because they didn't know, they were being chased. You know, there we've just got past. There are no proper borders in most cases. They were being chased by policemen, having their things grabbed, or sometimes a corruption deal made to allow them to share what they had brought in, basically legally. So that's why I say that sometimes educated people are the ones who are letting our country down, because surely they should have told them that these things, you need not go into the bush to bring them into Zambia from Malawi, because they are yet, as you saw from the statistics, trade between Zambia and Malawi is very low. Now, why is this happening? Are there things we can export? Of course there are things we can export. If you followed the thinking of integrating Africa from the grassroots, indeed, you can learn a lot about what can be sold in the next country. But the people who meet to discuss integration, exports, and so forth, are people who are not interested in looking at the patterns as reviewed by the common people. Now, sorry, I'm taking a little...
Yeah, there's quite a number, actually, Governor.
Let me just say something about...
One recommendation, maybe.
Exports. I think every country has got things they can export. And I can give you one very good example. Mangoes. They are rotting in most of our countries. I think this is true. Yet you can make, you can eat raw mango. You can make confiture, jam. Yeah? You can do a lot of things. You can also dry it. And the equipment for drying is so simple that it can be made in every country. But yet we are importing. As I was coming here in my room, I've got some dried fruit I bought at Harare International Airport. And it was imported from South Africa. And I was talking to this lady. I just wanted to help. I said, but why are you selling dried fruits from South Africa? Can't you dry it here in Zimbabwe? And you can even do so. These are the problems. And if we take the example of successful countries like South Korea, I think most of you have studied abroad. You know that if you wanted to eat something like kapenta or daga, as you call it here in East Africa, you could find it in a Korean shop. Even when I wanted something like milimi to make my ugali, I could find even pounded rice from a Korean shop. But there are a lot of Africans in Europe who could have been taking these things into Europe for those Africans who want to eat them. The first maize meal I bought in UK was from an Indian shop, those whom we expelled from
Uganda.
Here. Yeah.
Governor, I want to take...
So I'll put my desk to rest.
Okay, you have. Now, can I take... Yes, behind the governor, please. Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think the discussion on economic diversification and industrialization for regional integration is a valid one. But still, I think regional integration is beneficial, even when we are at a very low stage of development. And I said this before, maybe when I was a college student in the 1990s, we used to have textbooks that tell us that African countries cannot trade among themselves because they have similar economic structures. We do not have to wait until we have different economic structures. Today, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda are the main trading partners for each other. Probably for Tanzania, for Uganda today, it is India, Kenya, Uganda. Sometimes it is Uganda, it is Tanzania or Kenya that is the first trading partner. If you look at total trade, total exports and imports, Kenya is by far the main trading partner for Uganda. So we are not there, but we have to start. What I would like to say is that regional integration brings benefits and costs in the short run, but in the long run, we will all benefit. We have to look at trade creation. Our calculations in ECA in preparation for CFTA, which will be signed this month, shows that in terms of trade creation, the benefit is very high, both in the short run and in the long run. But because of trade diversion in the short run, there can be costs to some countries. So we have to work out how to address these costs and share benefits equally. In the long run, the cost is positive because of trade facilitation. So we have to work on infrastructure, and rules and regulations, standards and so on to facilitate trade so that we all benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I come on to the, yes, please? Make your pick.
Thank you. It's Governor Ngandu.
Yes.
Well, I'm Chami from Tanzania. Governor Ngandu did speak, painfully about the low state of intra-African trade, and he even gave statistics between his own country and Malawi. Now, since we are so much interested in promoting intra-African trade, what do we think about economic partnership agreements between Africa and the EU? Are they helping promote integration on the continent? And the reason I ask this is that one of the clauses that are being contested is the most favored nation clause, whereby a bloc in Africa that is negotiating with the EU will actually offer those terms to EU. Any terms that they enter with any other trading partner or any other bloc, those terms, the favorable terms, must also apply to EU. Now the question is, if we sign EPAs and we open our doors completely to EU products in our blocks, will that enhance economic partnership? Will that enhance inter-trade, African trade in Africa? Will it improve trade? Will it improve integration? And in tandem to that, why is that EU is negotiating with some blocks but not African Union? Why doesn't EU as a continental body speak with the continental body in Africa, but instead EU is choosing to speak with East African Community, ECOWAS, SACU, and others? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'll come back to you. Let me just take 1 second, another question from the middle. I'll come back, okay? Yes, can I take yours, please? Microphone. Can you use the one next?
Is going straight to Africa, the transatlantic trade.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dr. Machila from Malawi, Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. There is a lot based on the discussions and deliberations that are taking place in here, but in order to harness a proper center, for integration in Africa, there is need to institutionalize it in the academia, because otherwise such particular talk could just be like a talking show. Looking at the 2063 African Union agenda, if we are to reach to that particular point, there is need, and let me make a proposition, maybe for members to deliberate, if we can be able to set up Center for African Integration, which can be housed at any other university in Africa, so that the young ones who are quite vigilant could be trained on how to engine integration of Africa in the area of transport, in the area of manufacturing, in the area, so that everything that we are trying to deliberate and don't have solutions, that could be like a think tank for Africa, so that by the end of time, you could be able to see that those are the people that will be moving forward with energy and then replace our efforts that we are trying to discuss in this particular, in such meetings that we are having at this particular point. Mr. Chair, through you, if you can look at maybe at the representation here, we are maybe all of us remaining with 20 years, then we'll be retiring. And it means that whatever we'll be discussing by the year 2063, it will be a thing of the past. So there is need to empower the young ones so that the African demographic dividend, that they should be able to take over the mantle and bring Africa as one in the long term. Other than that, I'm afraid we cannot make it. Thank you.
Yeah, my fear is that if the older ones don't implement what you have recommended, you may overthrow them. You have the powers of numbers. But why don't we come back to, I want to take a second one from my extreme left. Is there any other? Oh, a quick one, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is going to be quick. My name is Lusanda from South Africa, the National Planning Commission Secretariat. I think the discussion, we agree as policymakers sitting here that regional integration is important for the continent. And also I think somebody mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday that we do have policies towards this regional integration. But the missing aspect in terms of the discussion is what Dr. Maroping has raised in terms of the implementation. What needs to be changed? As African countries, we do have those policies. They are there. We know what needs to be done, but the lacking aspect is the implementation. Is there something that we can propose as policymakers in order to change that? Is it about the policy or is it about the mindset of us as African countries in terms of what needs to be achieved? That's something that I thought I should just show in the discussion.
Dr. Marping was recommending mind change. So, but I want to take a hand at the back there. Yes, please.
Oui. Merci. Donc, effectivement, on a dit que toutes les régions ont compris que pour développer leur pays ou leur région, il faut les industrialiser. Le problème ne se pose pas à ce niveau. Malheureusement, les politiques mises en place ne suivent pas. Parce que qu'est-ce qu'on a l'habitude de voir? On a effectivement l'habitude de voir des politiques fiscales qui sont mises en place pour attirer les investisseurs. Or, les investisseurs aussi, ils comprennent ce qui se passe. Quand un investisseur vient dans une région ou dans un pays, il regarde d'abord le tableau de bord de ce pays ou de cette région. C'est-à-dire, il va voir est-ce que les finances publiques de ce pays sont soutenables. Est-ce qu'effectivement, dans ces pays, les taux de croissance est durable? Est-ce que l'inflation est maîtrisée? Est-ce que les taux d'intérêt ne sont pas prohibitifs? Est-ce que le chômage est maîtrisé? C'est ça le tableau de bord d'un investisseur. Quand les pays ou les régions mettent en place des politiques fiscales pour attirer les investisseurs, l'investisseur, il n'est pas dupe, il se dit, bon voilà, on a mis en place des avantages fiscaux, je viens investir pour 5 ans et repartir. Il ne s'inscrit pas dans la durée. Et c'est ça malheureusement qui se passe dans la plupart de nos régions. Les investisseurs, ils viennent pour profiter des avantages fiscaux mis en place. Ils ne s'inscrivent pas dans la durée, ils ne s'inscrivent pas sur 10 ans. Et il y a énormément d'exemples qui suivent dans la plupart de nos pays. Ils viennent, ils profitent des avantages fiscaux et ils repartent parce qu'effectivement, les finances publiques de ce pays ne sont pas soutenables. Vous allez voir qu'au bout de 3 ou 4 ans, quand un pays a un taux d'intérêt prohibitif, il est sûr que sa croissance, au bout d'un temps, va repartir vers la baisse. Et c'est ça, malheureusement, qui se pose pour la plupart de nos régions. Je vous remercie.
Yeah, thanks for your participation for now. I wanted to come back to the panel, but maybe I take yours. If you can be very quick, I'll take yours. Can you be quick? You will not. Oh, yes. Very, very honest. I think I want to come back to this panel. The elites have been blamed, the politicians have been blamed, the youth are anxious and they want to participate. We have those who are the voiceless, people who are not participating in this integration process, the youth, the women. So, my panel, you need to help us in terms of some recommendations. I mean, someone asked a question. What are we recommending so that our governments can implement what they have signed up to? So, you are the panel who wants to go first on these so many issues coming from the discussion. Yes, please. Recommendations now. I want to narrow it down to some recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think first of all, with all the policies that we presently have in existence, there's a need for a thorough desk review. What exists, and let's see, document the listing of the activities that have been put in place, and look at it to see what has worked and what has not worked. What has not worked can be scrapped, and what has worked can be strengthened for further implementation. But I also think that even if we do this, if we do not have the political will or the buy-in of our leaders, we'll be wasting our time. Because at the end of the day, they are the final decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I would like to give a rejoinder
To the last speaker, as somebody who has also been in politics and at that level. There are these issues that are discussed and very pertinent. And you would see that this will indeed help to map the way forward for a country or a region. But you will see that if there is no political will, that will not work. You will see that if that is not favoring that particular government, that government that is ruling at that particular time, if that thing they cannot benefit anything, we look at even investment. We have seen that when governments are changing, there are some people who were investors in the country and they were in line with that particular government that has gone. And when the new government comes in, these people, they will go back. And these will also look for theirs. So each and everything that we can try and that we have been trying, if there is no political will, we'll see that that particular thing is dying. I have seen it, where we have seen nice bills being discussed at cabinet level, but we have, in the end, turned them down simply because that will not favor us during the time of general election. So that's the danger.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, my recommendation follows from the comments that came from Dr. Adam of Sudan, regarding we don't have a choice, to say that integration is not working. I think the studies, literature, researches that have been done clearly shows that it is important. But I think we need to do it differently. We're talking about the voiceless, not women alone, but I mentioned earlier. I think we need to involve everybody. We need to involve the people, not just only the elites, as we have just been saying here, designing and deciding everything. Could even go to the level, if you want to go to the monetary union, for example, in the East African. Are we going to ask the people, or are we just going to do it like that? And anytime we want to pull out, we pull out. I think that will not be a good way of doing it. We need to involve the people. Thank you.
Someone told me one time that you never put some of these issues to a referendum, otherwise you might get Brexit. So, do I have any other? Yes, Governor. Why are you?
Thank you. What I wanted to say is that we need, I think, a slight change in the way we approach the issue of integration. Quite a bit has been achieved, but I think we would have achieved a lot more if we did not make the fatal mistake of putting trade policy and trade facilitation as the core, at the center of integration. There are a lot more other things that are necessary, that are important, that should be taken along with trade facilitation measures, on which most of the RECs have expended a lot of their energy. I think that we need to address about 4 things which I think we need to pay attention to. One, I think we need to address the need for appropriate investment. Investment that supports economic transformation and diversification of countries to which we belong to. These obviously will require resources, they require funds, and as you know, there are hardly any dedicated funds that will support integration effort in the sense that I'm talking about. There's a need to build private sector capability and capacity through skills development and overcome some of the supply side constraints. a lot of the things, I remember Governor Caleb Fundang was talking about some of the little things that people could do. For example, just being able to extract juice from a mango and package it. The technology required there is not much, but I think what is lacking in most of our countries, just the basic skills to undertake those. The third thing is that we need to involve the private sector. I think we have agreed here that a lot of this discussion that takes place among the policymakers, yeah, and among the politicians, the public sector. Hardly do we have the business community. Where we are here is an example. I don't know how many people in here are from business. Here, how many? There's a farmer. I know there's a farmer somewhere out there. Thank you. But you see, these are the people that should actually be driving this process. I know that in my own country, some of the strongest opponents to regional integration are actually the business people themselves, the business community. They will tell you, we do not like this nonsense that you are imposing upon us. We think that, for example, they will say South Africa is taking all the, South Africa has turned Zambia into its own market, and therefore we are not able to produce and put goods into this market. So if you do not carry the people that are supposed to be the major players in this process, then I think there's a mistake, and I think we haven't done a good job in that. And then lastly, I think we have to address the failures and tensions that arise. Economic integration inevitably leads to certain tensions arising for various reasons. And also there's a need for a compensation mechanism so that those who think or actually are disadvantaged find recourse. I think Professor Adam yesterday mentioned that markets do not correct themselves. They don't have a self-correction mechanism. So if a market is 40 and you allow it to go on, it will not correct itself. I think that what has happened to Brexit and the Trump effect could quite easily become a Pandora's box, especially given those who already have their own concerns about the unfairness of trade arrangements. And that it may be, I hope it doesn't happen, but it could happen, that because of what is going on in Europe, some people here will start saying, well, I don't think we should belong to this community. We're getting out.
Thank you.
I'm recommending on having a private sector left free from political driven. Many times in our countries, we find that when a business community are ready to export or have goods to export, sometimes are restricted by governments. So they have to be left free so that they can be able to do their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh yes, I have another 3 on this side. Why don't I just go sequential? I start with you, please. Quick ones.
Ok, thank you. Peut-être en ce qui concerne le commerce transfrontalier, bien entendu, beaucoup l'ont dit, les obstacles sont visibles. Malgré tous les accords qui sont signés, vous avez des obstacles de part et d'autre des frontières, vous avez des services de police, vous avez des services de douane, vous avez l'immigration, la gendarmerie, tout ce que vous aviez pour vraiment contrôler les flux d'échange. Et donc, beaucoup de choses peuvent être faites à ce niveau. Il faut faciliter le passage des frontières à travers des règles bien transparentes et bien claires. Et je pense que ce sont des mesures qui n'appellent pas à grand investissement et qu'on pourrait vraiment encourager au niveau national et au niveau régional. Il y a aussi la question même des petits acteurs qui sont concernés. Bien entendu, ils ont besoin d'être encadrés. Alors, si on change un peu, le décideur change sa manière de voir l'idée qu'il se fait du secteur informel, bien sûr, il pourrait engager une relation beaucoup plus, on va dire une relation gagnant-gagnant, pour juste faire en sorte que ces acteurs-là soient informés, on renforce leurs capacités pour leur permettre d'être plus actifs dans l'économie. Certains pays le réussissent mieux dans l'objectif, bien sûr, de faire en sorte que les petits commerçants soient connectés aux chaînes de valeur internationales. Le Ghana, l'Ouganda, le Rwanda sont aussi des pays cités en exemple. Et les autres communautés pourraient vraiment les approcher et surtout lire leur expérience. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Marvin, please.
First, I want to underline or write in bold that question of inclusion. I think what we have been trying to say is inclusion. Not only should we have the public sector, but we must have the private sector, but also civil society. Also civil society. And also we have to engage women. I want to underline that, because if we want to move forward, we have to use all the capability or endowments that we have. Now, if you exclude women, it means you are not using all that you have. So we need those brains, we need that energy to move forward, not part of energy, not part of the brains we have on the continent. We must really engage the youth. Youth have, they can innovate, they have the energy, they have the dedication. So we should unleash that power, those good qualities that the youth have. And after all, they are a majority now on our continent. But also I want to plea also for inclusion of people living with disability. Well, just because someone is visually impaired or something like that doesn't mean that they can't produce anything. And then we waste the time of a young person leading a visually impaired person to beg in the street. Elsewhere, those people work. They do useful work and they add value. And that can be done and is being done elsewhere. So during consultations and implementations, inclusion is very important. And there has to, of course, be clear, strategic frameworks, action plans and programs and so on. So, really, the results-based management thing can be taken to a wider field. It's not just for corporations, but out there or in small organizations, but overall, to have clear goals, objectives, realistic timelines, baselines, monitoring and evaluation, some form of accountability. And there must also be drivers. Who drives that process? This who is driving it to make sure that things are moving? I want to conclude by saying that, we are on a conveyor belt of musical chairs. The groups are not the same. I realized that the people that we consulted when we were putting up either Common African Position on Post-2015 Development Agenda, and during this, African 2063, Agenda 2063, the people that we consulted have moved. The conveyor belt has moved. The new ones are in, and they don't know about it. There isn't enough. So communication, the media can play a big role to keep things alive, good programs alive, so that as the conveyor belt moves, the issues remain on the table.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll stop now.
Yeah, Rose, a quick one. Ambassador, anything else? No. Let me start with Rose. Rose, please.
Yes.
A quick one.
Yeah, very quick. One is that I think we need to do more research work to identify the very strategic way that we can bring in the synergies of all the blocks that are there and look at the complementarity and build up that we want to have if we actually move into the umbrella body of the African region. So I think we need a lot of research work. Two, I like all that has been said, the inclusion of women and the like, and the youth. But I think we need a vehicle that can maybe enable them to feel that they are participating. And I feel that as we do our diversification, industrialization, identifying clear value chains could be important in facilitating to build up the capabilities that will take us to the next level as far as industrialization is concerned. And finally, yesterday we talked about various issues of the structural funds and the like. We have talked about the voices of our African leaders and the need for political goodwill. And maybe it's the high time we ask ourselves, how can we build the capacity of AU maybe to drive this vehicle for integration in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ambassador, final word, one quick word.
I'll be very quick. And for me, I think whatever we do, one of the most important thing is political leadership and governance.
Okay.
This is very important, and in order to steer anything, even including regional integration. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot for this very rich discussion. Something that really clearly comes out is that we have some level of trade. It may be informal, it might be formal, but there is some level of trade. There is something that is going on at the moment, and we need to build on that. I think that is, to me, a starting point. And I like the point, I think, by Adam. Let us not be too frustrated by non-implementation. I think speed may be slow. We may have some frustrations coming from non-implementation. But let us remain hopeful that we will finally get those champions, okay, to finally implement what we agree on. For AERC, you chose a topic which was rethink regional integration. I think at the end of it all, they have also assigned more duties to you. You need to document failures, you need to document what works, you need more research, you need to disseminate the research, and it's good that that is coming out of a group that has got academia, policymakers. Hopefully we have some politicians or potential politicians here. They are, okay. I heard they are former ministers, and we finally hear what goes on in cabinet. But yeah. Now, there is the issue of diversification. I think we acknowledge the need for diversification, but there is already trade going on at the moment, even without diversification. Yes, diversification is desired, but let us not say we will only trade after diversification. Inclusiveness has been underscored, and look at it from different angles. Inclusiveness of the informal sector, private sector, engage women, engage the youth, and we should have a process that includes accountability to these numerous groups of people. I like the point that let us not only have trade policy and trade facilitation driving regional integration. It is much broader than that. We need appropriate investment, comparative advantage, the involving of the private sector, so many other issues. I think there is a role for the state. I heard people talk about some body, institution that will have to facilitate trade. We've again talked about comparative advantage coming in the location of certain manufacturing units. That has to come within some framework which might include a role by the state. So many panelists have talked about the issue of political will and implementation, underscored, and it's good Dr. Marupinga has been very frank and shared the lack of non-implementation with us. I think we've done with the political leadership. So, I think you have a lot on your plate.
And also your plate.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So, my very sincere, I want to thank the panel. I want you to join me in thanking this panel. It hasn't been easy. And also a round of applause for yourselves for also keeping awake and then participating. I thank you.
Okay. So we are just about to conclude. And I promise no more speeches. And I think before I say anything, we should have a show of hands for a highly skillful chair of the panel, very productive panel that we have. Just a moment. This is Louis Casacanda. He is one of our distinguished
and proud product of ARC, and now is also the chair of the ARC board. And he has facilitated a partnership of Bank of Uganda to work with us in terms of logistics for this, I think, successful senior policy seminar. And a show of hands for Bank of Uganda. So I think SPS is an example of integration. You know, what we've done doing is we have pan-Africanized this. We actually go around the continent. In the last 5 years, we were in Addis Ababa for the first time, and then we went to Mozambique, I think the first time, and then we went to Nairobi, not the first time, and then Abidjan last time, and then this year in Kampala. This is in the space of one of the arms of ARC, that is, how do you interface policymakers? How do you deliver knowledge to policy? And we don't do this top-down approach. We don't do, you know, economics is pretty imperfect. And we resist the temptation of prescribing. We rely very heavily on these interactive dialogue, participation, and presentation that you just observed. But not just talk, but it's really something based on knowledge and evidence. That is the original mandate of ARC. That is bringing rigor and evidence to economic policy making in Africa. This is one example of what we are trying to do. And as I mentioned yesterday, I said they have 3 specific objectives, one of which is really, I'm confident that by the time you get out of this place, you're probably more informed about this subject. And you are more informed on the basis of something, knowledge, and also sharing of experiences. It's a pretty interesting panel that we just observed. And I think the second is a lot of you were telling us what to do, you know, which is really what we want. Because we cannot do what we are doing in a vacuum. It's important that we play in the space of what is imperative to Africa. And you're actually helping us in doing that. And the third, I'll be coming back in a moment, we also want to be partners, really partners in knowledge generation, partners in disseminating knowledge. And also, and then a sense and a symbol for this partnership is what we're going to do in a moment. In Maputo, Mozambique, without our preparation, somebody said, you know, this SPS on smallholder agriculture was very, very productive, high energy. We should not just walk out of this place. We should have some kind of communicate. So we had what is known as Maputo Declaration from the ARC network. So that tradition got actually done also in Addis Ababa, in Nairobi, in Abidjan last year. And then we're hoping that something like that will happen here as well. So it was kind of sequential. At the heart of that is really this word about inclusion. Inclusion. And I was invited to this Prosperity Commission launch in Nairobi a month ago. You know, Melinda Gates has come up with this interesting commission. Basically, the idea of technology and how you can actually foster inclusive development and growth. And then at the end of the panel, they were all asked to say something. You know, what is your concluding statement? So Melinda Gates said, include, include, and include, and she stopped. So the integration that we are going to talk about, what we have talked about, it has to be inclusive integration, inclusive regional integration, inclusive industrialization, financial inclusion, inclusive infrastructure. So that would be at the heart. So there's a kind of a theme that cuts across through all these senior policy seminars on financial inclusion, smallholder agriculture, industrialization in Abidjan, and today regional integration. From the communique, we're not going to come up with prescriptions in it. We're not coming up with policies. It's really a statement of principles so that one thing, we come out of this a little bit more committed, and sending a message, not only to those who are in this room, there is a pretty critical mass of highly qualified senior policymakers. By the way, we try and diversify. We have noticed that when policymakers get some pressure from non-state actors, civil society, right, and private sector, things tend to move a little bit forward. And you have noticed the composition of this group is actually reflective of that. But the policy implications, prescriptions, implementation stuff is a variety of the stuff that we do. All of these collaborative research projects are actually intended to do that. We don't take our thematic capacity building research to policymakers because that's intended, but we do take collaborative, and this is actually is an outcome of our collaborative research. So the objective of today's communique is not to say, okay, this is what we're going to implement. Okay, really, it's a statement of principles and commitment and a message, and using the same theme across those four that we have, that I mentioned before. And we had, by the way, we had a drafting group, and also we got some key messages from our presenters, and also some senior policymakers. And then we had a meeting of this is the final group, inclusive of Franny Lothier. She's also on ARC board treasurer, and she's also heads up auditor risk committee, and she's one of the she's been among those most dedicated to ARC and support, and I really appreciate Franny. So and then also Maruping, Anthony Maruping, I keep on saying governor. Anyway, he's also coming on an RC board. He was also part of the final meeting that we had. So I'm going to invite actually Franny Lothier to actually read the statement of principles and communique called do we call Kampala or Entebbe Declaration? The Kampala Declaration.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm going to get some help because with my eyesight I can't see that far out. Thank you very much, Lema, for the preamble to this session. Let me start with a few words as they're setting up the computer. I thought these last 2 days, we started first with the head, went through all the research results and shared lessons and so on. We are now coming to a part where we are going to the heart. We have to commit to a statement that we all agree, that we can then walk from here and say, this is where we came out. And then finally, we would need to use our hands and legs to get these messages out to our teams, to our decision-making bodies, and to the implementers, so that what we've done and said here can go towards implementation. So I'm just going to, my job is very simple, is to walk you through paragraph by paragraph and get just very quick reactions so that we don't spend too much time, but so that when we leave here, this is a statement that we can feel comfortable with. And having participated in the one in Abidjan, when I was still at the ADB, when we hosted the AERC Senior Policy Maker Series, the process can actually lead to tremendous implementation results in the organizations that are embedded within the process. So I think here with the witness and colleagues who have put their time behind writing this so that we can have it here, it would serve, I think, a purpose beyond this meeting here. So I'll start with the preamble. The title says, Senior African Policymakers Reaffirm the critical role of regional integration in economic transformation of African economies. And that's really the title of this seminar. And it says, at the Senior Policy Seminar 20, held in Entebbe, Uganda on 12 to 13 March 2018, and hosted by the African Economic Research Consortium, AERC, in partnership with the Bank of Uganda on the theme, Rethinking Regional Integration in Africa. Senior policymakers and other stakeholders, private sector and civil society from around the continent adopted a declaration as an affirmation of their strong commitment to accelerating regional integration in Africa. Any reactions to this broad opening statement? Yes, please, Governor.
Yes.
It's there.
Yes.
Private sector is there. After stakeholders. Oh, you mean were they here?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Quite a few actually. Yes.
Yes, please.
Chamber of Commerce, farmers, we had a very, yeah.
I think,
And also technology, IT. Yeah.
Sorry?
academics will be
Academics.
injured if you don't include them there.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
All right. So
Okay.
we'll include academia. They're usually
Okay.
captured under civil society, but we can
Yeah,
explicitly capture academia.
Okay.
Any other? Yes, please.
High-level policymakers like this one, for the sake of inclusiveness, which we recommended here, we should have representations of small of organizations like those ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we've captured that. We will include academia explicitly. We will include international organizations that were represented here. And we will take on board for future seminars to invite representatives of small organizations in addition to small farmers. So let's move on then to the declaration itself. The first paragraph says, we, collective we, African senior policymakers and private sector actors assembled here at the AERC Senior Policy Seminar 20, held in partnership with the Bank of Uganda. So there's no issue there. Recognizing the challenges that Africa is facing, especially demography, and that's youth employment challenges, geography, most landlocked countries. Africa is the most landlocked countries on its continent. Empowerment of women, climate change, lack of diversity of African economies, among others. So let's take feedback on how you want to change that. Yes, please.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, this is not right. Yeah,
So we should remove it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so many?
Yeah. Maybe include, yeah.
Including.
Okay.
Okay. Any other feedback? Yes, please.
I can read somewhere to say lack of diversity of African economies among others. I think maybe that's too harsh. Maybe we could say limited diversity. That could be softer.
All right. Limited diversity of African economies.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think it's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other feedback? Yes, please. The microphone.
Madam Chair, forgive me if this is coming in front, but it's connected to the lack of diversity. I think at the moment, our major issue is actually lack of coordination. We have a food deficit of 60 billion per annum. We have also overproduction of some food in the areas in the continent. So it is possibly not an issue of similar basket of goods when we have a deficit of 60 billion, which is bigger than the amount of money we receive in aid. So my recommendation in line with coordination and diversity is inclusive of use of data, which would require a African Economic Research Consortium and other partners to see how we use big data, spatial data, to locate and enhance coordinated production and coordinated trade within the region. Because we have the food, but we import food. As we speak right now, I'm very sure there is a ship docked somewhere of imported food. As we speak right now, there is a farm which is powering milk. As we speak right now, there is a child who is going malnourished. But all these resources are on the continent. So we must rethink on that specific problem.
Thank you very much. Yes, we capture coordination in two places.
Yeah.
We will get to it in the paragraph coming a bit later. But your broader point on big data and integrating information, we will capture when we come to the action list. So let's hold that thought, and when we get there, and if it's not represented, we'll come back to you. So I take it we are okay with that. Let's move to the next paragraph, which is a simple one, which says also recognizing that regional integration is lagging behind the Abuja Treaty timelines. This was a repeated implementation, including at the last panel here. So that's, I think, is there any comment on that? Or which we agree we should move with that one as it is. So, further recognizing that regional integration should be thought of in its broadest sense, including, among other things, integration of goods and services markets, financial markets, labor markets, and at all levels of society. This one captures, I think, Governor Ngandu's comment on going beyond facilitation, and all of the comments we had yesterday also in Bruce's presentation and today in Bernard's presentation, and the comments made by the floor. Any suggestions to this paragraph? Are we happy with it? Yes? Okay. Also recognizing that deepening regional economic integration in Africa will require concerted and coordinated efforts, considerable financial resources, and strong political will and commitment from African governments, and readiness to share sovereignty. So, and yes, please.
Thank you. Just before strong political will and commitment, just before intensive sensitization of private sector and civil society organization. That's my proposal.
Okay.
Just before strong political will and commitment, intensive sensitization of private sector and civil society organizations.
Okay. That's a very good suggestion. If we could say communication and sensitization, would that
Okay.
capture?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other comments? So this paragraph will be revised to include and strong political will to say intensive communication and sensitization efforts, particularly to civil society and private sector. Okay. Yes, please.
I thought that the last line seems to be just too strong. I think why don't we just stop at strong political will and commitment from African governments? The readiness to share sovereignty, I thought at this stage is too strong.
I think
We
it could be a friendly amendment.
We had a debate also,
Yeah,
so we'll remove the word sovereignty and
Yeah.
say shared responsibility.
Okay. Yeah. Isn't that even strong? It goes the other way.
So So,
See, I think it's... Huh?
yeah.
Huh?
Yes,
Huh?
please. Let's take other
Yeah.
views and then we'll
Yeah.
conclude.
There is just no way we can have full integration without making some political concession. And we've come up to say that we were considering integration in the broadest context. That would mean political, maybe compromise. You may have to give us sovereignty in certain instances to be successful. So I wanted to state, whether we as policymakers today, are we prepared to suggest to our political leaders to continue with every aspect of integration that we discussed here? For instance, we go to meetings and discuss monetary integration. And it is not possible to have that without political compromises, where you lose sovereignty. From the example that we got from Adams. So are we sincerely saying now that we should recommend to our political leaders that we still believe in this broad integration? Or should we limit integration to certain aspects from this political dialogue, since we are rethinking?
If it captures the comments made. So the last sentence would say, and readiness to, I had a word and it's now gone, to share responsibility and I had the word and it just left. To not to cede, but to commit to benefits for the African people. Would that capture it? If they can look one level up beyond national?
We are rethinking integration, regional or continental integration. Okay, but is it actually possible, from what Professor Adam just showed, or the steps involved, are we from this dialogue or the policy seminar, are we going to suggest that we go the way we've been going? Because this declaration is still telling me that we still want to go the way we've been going. But it's still realistic that we can achieve this continental or regional integration in all of its aspects, in terms of the broadest aspect that we just talked about, broadest way. Is it possible? Or can we narrow down to certain aspect of integration and give to our political leaders suggestions that they can work with? Because sometimes it bothers me when we go to meetings to discuss monetary integration, monetary union. We got objectives, we got goals, we got targets set up, but we can't meet them. Are we just wasting time with this broadest integration?
Okay, so specific language to capture that, we can use the compromise that they've used in the European Union of subsidiarity, if people are happy with that, which says, so we'll say for subsidiarity and readiness to share accountability and responsibility. Does that capture the sentiment? I see heads nodding. Okay. So let's move to the next paragraph, which is commending the vision and commitment of African heads of state to the integration agenda, as affirmed by their adoption of the Abuja Treaty of 1991, which became effective in 1994, that lays out the path to an integrated Africa. No comments on this one? Okay. The vision, a typo on vision. Okay. Thank you. Yes, please.
Yeah. Coming back again to
Alexander.
what he was pointing concerning the borders, I think in a dynamic way, because that is moving. Talking about integration, when we say in a borders way,
Broadest aspect.
I think it should be in a dynamic way. is what we are rethinking now.
Okay, so where would you suggest the dynamic?
To me, borders we cannot account for all. It's not possible.
I'm sorry?
But maybe it's moving, and when we are rethinking about, so we see that in a dynamic way.
Reference to what?
Yeah, which paragraph are you referencing?
Paragraph before.
Before.
Borders?
Yeah, to change it.
Changing borders into dynamic?
Recognizing that deepening regional economic integration in Africa will require concerted and coordinated efforts, considerable financial resources, and strong political will and commitment from African governments, subsidiarity, and readiness to share accountability and responsibility. Are you suggesting we add a word dynamic somewhere? Is that what I hear?
It's before, I think.
Before. The one on
Where we put borders.
further recognizing that regional integration should be thought of in its broadest sense?
Yeah.
To add the word dynamic. Okay.
Dynamic sense, yeah.
In its dynamic sense. In its broadest and dynamic sense. Okay, and. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was important to add. Shall we go then? I don't see any other hands. Yes, please.
One, two, okay. Thank you. Just a small one on the commending the vision. Sometimes instead of African heads of state, it's African heads of state and government.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heads of state and government. All right. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to the next paragraph, which says, also commending the African Union on its drive for a continental free trade area, CFTA, visa-free regime, and single air transport market. Did we miss anything important that the AU has done that we should commend? Okay. Let's move on. Having also noted, oh, sorry, yes, please.
Maybe instead of saying visa-free, maybe you should say free movement, because it involves much more than that. There are more people within Africa.
Free movement. Okay, so we'll change visa-free regime to say free movement and single air transport market. Okay, these are the three recently from the just ended summit, so that's why they're highlighted. Having also noted the progress made to date in regional integration, beginning with the formation of the 8 regional economic communities, RECs, which have greatly enhanced trade and integration within the blocs, and that will serve as building blocks for the African Economic Community. Any comments on that? Okay. I don't see any hands, so we'll move on. Further, having noted the need to prioritize and harmonize policy, regulatory and governance frameworks across the continent, and the need to implement agreed integration pacts. Again, this one is taking from all the conversations we've had, priority, implementation, harmonization, especially of these important institutional and regulatory areas. Okay. Mindful that private sector ought to be at the center of regional economic integration, and underlining the need to foster alliances between state, private sector, and civil society actors in order to enhance economic governance for job creation. States. Between states.
And also the private sector.
Between states, the private sector, and civil society. I think here, given Madame Greaves' comments, perhaps we can explicitly highlight women and also the comment made about youth, so that we can keep that inclusive aspect, if everyone is all right with that. Okay, so we will explicitly, and I think Governor Maruping had a list that we can embed from the closing of the last panel. Okay, we move on. Also mindful that although deepening integration generates large economic gains overall, there is need to ensure the benefits are shared equitably to ensure inclusive growth and development, thus requiring mechanisms and institutions to shield vulnerable groups and populations, including women and youth. Yes? Okay, no additions. Acknowledging the fact that all sub-Saharan African countries are members of at least one regional economic bloc. Okay, with that? Yes, so we remove sub-Saharan, we say African. Is everyone all right with that? One continent? Yeah. Okay. So now we come to the action part. So after acknowledging the fact that all African countries are members of at least one regional economic bloc, here now are the actions. 1, affirm that regional integration is a fundamental pillar for Africa to realize her development aspirations as articulated in the SDGs and the African Union Agenda 2063. Okay? Sorry. So 2, her development aspiration. Yeah, Africa is a she, right? Because no, some countries are like Germany is a he. So I don't know. It says her. Number 2, further affirm the need to harmonize regulatory frameworks and governance mechanisms to deepen regional integration, especially enhancing regional infrastructure, roads, rail, energy, ICT, water, easing movement of goods and services across borders, facilitating movement of people and service providers across national boundaries. Any comments on this one? We're okay? 3, commend the critical role of African Economic Research Consortium, AERC, in capacity building for promoting evidence-based policies and generating the knowledge basis for decision-making on such key economic policy issues as regional integration. Okay? 4, recognize that many well-meaning declarations and strategies have largely not been fully executed, in part owing to the absence of mechanisms and institutions to address the interests of winners and losers, call for immediate action and a sense of urgency in deepening African integration. I think the word is paramount we can take out because of the sense of urgency is already there. Any comments on this one? The idea being that we don't want this to just be a talk shop, so we want to go to implementation. And a number of comments were made, including at the panel, that we need to, the chair pushed the panelists to say, what are your concrete recommendations to move towards implementation? So this paragraph captures that. Any suggestions? No? All right.
Can someone move the text?
The text. Okay. Can we move the text up, please, so the participants can see beyond number 4? We are going to number 5, which says, further recognize that financial integration is a prerequisite for regional integration. Thus, the need for consolidation of disparate financial markets, including stock exchanges, to finance major integration projects. Being a finance body with governors and ministers of finance, this was an important point, that we should not leave behind the capital markets. Are we all right with that? Governor Caleb? Yes, please.
Yeah, there was the issue of regional development banks playing a role of providing finance for regional integration. We had a session on the strategy, for the African Development Bank. Can we capture it in that?
Yes.
Yeah, not only that, there are also cross-border banks.
Yes.
Yeah, cross-border
PTA Bank or TDB.
Yeah, cross-border.
Yes.
And also.
So would this language capture the comment? Yes, please, Governor Marupe.
I agree with Governor Kasikande on that. But I wanted to, something still nagging me about that thing about losers and winners. I mean, there are such frightening words. Can we find more moderate words to express the same thing?
We were also using the words of costs and benefits of regional integration.
Benefiting and
But I think that when you say equitably shared benefits, implicit you're also trying to get around winners and losers. Maybe I think this is not even mention winners and losers.
Okay, could I suggest this language and see if it captures the sentiment?
Okay.
So we're going back to number 4, if we can get the text up there. Recognize that many well-meaning declarations and strategies have largely not been fully executed, in part owing to the absence of mechanisms and institutions to address the varied and differing interests, costs, and benefits of action, call for immediate action and a sense of urgency in deepening African integration. So differing and varied interests, costs, and benefits. Okay, so that captures that one. Let's go then to number 5. There was a suggestion to add explicitly the regional financial institutions. So let's see if this captures your feedback. Further recognize that financial integration is a prerequisite for regional integration. Thus, the need for consolidation of disparate financial markets, including stock exchanges to finance major integration projects, and enhanced role and leadership of regional financial institutions. Are we okay with that? Yes, please. That microphone, please.
Looking at the need for consolidation of disparate financial markets, are we looking at consolidation or we want to look at coordination of financial markets?
We're looking at integration.
Integration, but the word consolidation, because if we intend to have to consolidate financial markets, there should be an institution that could have the oversight to be able to. That's my understanding. So I don't know if we could have regional banks or central banks coordinating financial markets. I think for me, I thought that could be better than consolidation, given that we do not have a regional central bank or a continental central bank.
Yeah.
I think that's too specific. I think we should leave the mechanisms for integration open-ended, because there are a variety of ways that you can actually consolidate and integrate. But I don't think that we should be pushing for or saying that you should have a regional bank or something, you know. I think we're simply making a broader statement for the need for financial integration in view of thin and liquid stock exchanges and also banks. And then I think you actually added financial institutions, but we're not talking about the institutional setup as to what we should do there.
Yeah. So I'll try, yes, please. Yes. I'll take the 2 comments. Yes, please, Minister.
I wanted you to go back actually to point 2.
Back to point 2. Can we finish this one and then we'll go back to point 2? Thank you. Yes, please.
Yeah, number 5. Further recognize that financial integration is a prerequisite for regional. When we use the word prerequisite, it means you cannot move any step without integration of the finances. So I think a prerequisite is too strong there. It should be essential. I think so.
I think so.
Okay.
I think he's right. Yeah.
All right.
It's essential. Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any other comments, so let me try to summarize what you have said and see if we all agree. Further recognize that financial integration is essential for regional integration. Thus, the need for consolidation of disparate financial markets, including stock exchanges, to finance major integration projects, and recognition of the central and leadership role played by regional financial institutions to achieve such integration. We okay? All right. So let's go to number 2 before we finalize with number 6, because there's a question raised on number 2. Can we have number 2? Yes, please.
Number 2, I was thinking of 1 or 2 things to be added, because tentatively, when I look at the non-implementation of this integration, because of 1 or 2 reasons. One is stability, and economic stability and political instability. So I was thinking that to further affirm the need for political and economic stability and to harmonize regulatory framework. So I said there was a need for that if possible. Further affirm the need for political and economic stability and harmonize regulatory framework and governance mechanism to deepen regional integration. That is the proposal.
Okay, great. So thank you very much. We will have the following then. Further affirm the need for political and economic stability and to harmonious regulatory frameworks and governance mechanisms to deepen regional integration, especially enhancing regional infrastructure, and the rest remains the same. Are we all right with that? Okay, I think that was very important because stability is very key. Okay, so we have the last one. We are almost there. Number 6, if we can have that up on the screen. It says, commit to undertake policy dialogue and consultations within our own governments and private sector institutions to reduce all barriers to intra-Africa trade, including trade in services, improve trade logistics, and ease movement of persons to scale up intra-African cooperation and boost regional industrialization and trade, and thus improve the welfare of our people. So this is a commitment for ourselves going back home to our organizations to go and carry this work out. Are we all happy with that personal commitment? Yes, please.
Yeah, I just need to be guided. There are restrictions that are imposed by professional bodies. I think the example I remember is the one of lawyers. As a professional body can impose restrictions on lawyers serving across borders. Can government commit to eliminate such a restriction imposed by professionals? And guidance on that?
You mean there are restrictions in place, right?
Yeah, the restrictions are there. I mean,
but then,
if you are admitted, for example, to the High Court of Uganda, you cannot just cross and represent someone in the High Court of South Africa, for example, or Malawi, even Malawi.
That's a very complicated question because it also comes to standards, and we didn't bring standards anywhere. Yeah. Could we have language that captures that leaves the door open to study these issues, because we didn't discuss them? So can we say to commit to undertake policy dialogue and consultations and further study within our own governments and private sector institutions to reduce all barriers? Would that capture it?
I think dialogue and consultation captures that.
Okay. I have two questions. Yes, please.
Yeah, on that one, I think the word standard should be outstanding. because that's when maybe at a later point, when we start expounding it, we can include what the Honorable Governor is putting in place. Because otherwise, those professionals, if we can leave them behind, all this thing could not work out. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please. Yes, please. The microphone right at the back to Tila.
Thank you. Just 2 points. I think the last one, in my view, can be represented by including a word which is more of generic. Identification and removal of recurring non-tariff barriers probably could address that. The other point I want to make is, I don't know whether this document is truly reflecting the potential role that can be played by development partners. So this probably can be strengthened by adding, I think you mentioned African heads of state and government, then adding as well as their development partners would probably be something that can be considered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments? Because those come to 2 different paragraphs, so we'll capture first paragraph 6 and then go back and revise paragraph 5. Yes, please. Yes, I think with the suggestion just made, the reduce will be replaced with identify and remove. So that captures, because then it will also capture the issue of any professional standards that be identified and either revised or removed. Yeah. Yes, please.
Because if you look at the medical profession, the legal profession, before you practice in any other jurisdiction, you must be licensed. I think that could be a barrier. Do we remove that, or are we trying to limit barriers? Are you going to tell a country, well, any doctor will work here and practice, or any lawyer can move and practice? Yes,
Okay.
removal, that's it.
Can we replace the word remove with address? Because addressing can be removal, can be restructure,
Address, I think address would be
rethink.
better.
Yeah, lowest
Okay.
common denominator.
All right. I don't see any other hands, so let me read what we've agreed on paragraph 6. Commit to undertake policy dialogue and consultations within our own governments and private sector institutions to identify and address all barriers to intra-Africa trade, including trade in services, improve trade logistics, and ease movement of persons to scale up intra-African cooperation and boost regional industrialization and trade, and thus improve the welfare of our people. Yes, please.
Within our own governments, civil society organizations, and private sector, please.
Okay.
So I would like to add civil society organizations. Thank you.
Very good. That has been taken on board. I don't see any other hands, so I think we had a paragraph we need to revise just to add and development partners after African heads of state and government and development partners. So I think with that we can, I can ask you, do we now adopt we're calling it the Kampala Declaration? Yes, please. Okay, we have 3 comments. Yes, please, Governor.
Will we be becoming excessive in the last paragraph normally to thank the organizers, AERC and the Bank of Uganda, and Uganda for hosting?
Okay.
The 2 sponsors and the organizers, the host country.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Moi, je vais m'exprimer en français.
Excusez-moi, s'il vous plaît. Yes, please.
What you read in number 4 and what is presented here, they are different. Please just read it again so that we can finalize it. Thank you.
So let me read number 4 again. Because we have edited it and I don't think the text you have there has captured the edits. Recognize that many well-meaning declarations and strategies have largely not been fully executed in part owing to the absence of mechanisms and institutions to address the varied and differing interests, costs, and benefits, call for immediate action and a sense of urgency in deepening African integration. So we've removed the word in is paramount, and we've removed winners and losers and replaced it with varied and differing interests, costs, and benefits. It's okay? All right, thank you. Yes, please.
En général, quand on fait une déclaration, souvent, il faut que cette déclaration soit efficace. Est-ce qu'il ne serait pas nécessaire d'envisager un paragraphe qui permettrait de faire le suivi et l'évaluation de cette déclaration?
Okay, merci. So there's a recommendation to add monitoring and evaluation so that there's efficiency in the implementation of this communique. Would we have any reactions to that? Yes, please, Governor.
That would mean that we are assigning the implementation to an organization. Which organization are we assigning it to? I think, as I thought Edie was saying that this is supposed to send a message to various governments.
Yeah, to you.
Yeah, so the monitoring would be limited to sending this message across, either posting it on the website or... That's correct.
Okay, s'il vous plaît. Yes.
Number 6, to reduce all barriers. All is, can we remove the word all, just to reduce barriers, I think.
Yeah, we've changed the language to say identify and address. So we've removed the word reduce and replaced it with identify and address.
Right.
Is that all right? Okay. The monitoring and evaluation is because this is a communique, it cannot be, there isn't a single body accountable for monitoring and evaluation. However, AERC will take the responsibility to report on what has happened as it has done since Abidjan and Nairobi and so on. Would that be all right? Because this way we don't have to put it in the language, but we know it will be done. Yes. Yes, Madam Greaves.
Yeah, I think it's necessary to put in the M&E, but we could say we call on the relevant African governments to take into consideration the possibility of monitoring the outcome of this meeting. It's necessary that it's there so future generation reading the communique will know that there was a proposal for monitoring.
This is a good suggestion, and we'll where we talk about the governments, heads of government, and heads of state and government, and development partners.
We can add the language there that they can take. We recommend that they take responsibility for monitoring. I think we have all the comments. We've concluded that we will add the last final paragraph. That will add a final paragraph that thanks the organizers, AERC, and the library. So, colleagues, can I now ask us to formally adopt the communique? Thank you very much.
By the way, I think really an incredible job once for running the I would not have been able to achieve what she did. So I think we'll have a kind of vote of thanks session. I'm going to call on witness. But before I do that, so it's been it's almost like 5 years for me at the AERC. And this is one of the signature things that I really appreciated.
So as you may know, I'm based in the US, and I used to serve as a resource person for ARC, and I used to head up Group C, and from there I got involved into running ARC. But my home base is Washington, and I came to ARC to serve for 3 years, and then I ended up extending that by Wilmington to the University of Maryland. Practically, I ended up serving out 5 years, first year, and I'm very, very pleased about that. But I think that in even those 5 years, and one of the things that really have been opposite for me is the senior policy center. And I think that one of my contributions really is to solidify the interface, linkage between senior African policymakers, ARC, and also how we deliver research policy, and also the whole area of African stakeholdership. And so I just wanted to say that this is going to be my last SPS in my role as ARC ED. But it won't be my last SPS otherwise. Okay? And I also wanted to point out that people have been asking me, what will happen when you go back. I've been, I have a position at the University of Maryland. They have actually kept it for me, secured professorship and finance, very generous. But I think that I have built some interesting human capital, after I go to Africa. So I started with the capital base, human capital base in the US. Now, ARC has given me an incredible opportunity to get to know the terrain of Africa and throughout the entire continent. So I've created another human capital. I'm going to merge those when I go to Washington. And I'll continue to be engaged with Africa and in a different format. So I'll be exiting this role, but I'm not exiting the continent. And I just want you, so since I'm going to meet you the last time, I'm going to say that I want to make that statement at the conclusion of SPS. And I'm going to call on witness to do the formal vote of thanks. Thank you.
Can I, before witness makes a statement, on behalf of the participants here, and I think on behalf of the board, since this is your last SPS as an ED, I would like to ask to put our hands together for the great job that you've done for AERC. Two, to thank you also for organizing this senior policy seminar. And I think, to me, as a co-host or a co-organizer, this has been a very successful senior policy seminar. So through you, we would also like to express our thanks to the Secretariat in totality. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I think this has been a sort of a very interesting 2 days. Can't believe that we have been sitting around here for 2 days already. Because I really wanted this to continue. It's a lot of learning. So I think to begin, I just want to sort of make a point that I think the ED mentioned earlier on that he hopes that the policymakers in this group will go home more informed. Of course, we would love that. But I also want to just say to you that actually I've also been very much informed by the discussions going on in this room. So I believe all of us will have actually benefited from the conversations that have gone on in the last 2 days. So essentially my role actually is just to give a lot of thanks. But of course what we know is that we have learned a lot and the discussion has been very useful, touching on really key issues when it comes to actual economic integration and the challenges that we have been facing over the years. So with that said, I'd like to really thank the Bank of Uganda, who is our host, as our partner in organizing this event. And of course, specifically we want to thank the governor, Professor Mutedile, and of course our board chair, Dr. Asekete, for the contribution and the efforts they have made to make sure that this SPS is a success. And I want to convey to the same statement that my boss has given, that we really feel that this SPS has been very, very successful in terms of the way we imagined or expected it to go. I think it has exceeded our expectations, so we're very honored about that. So of course, we want to thank the Prime Minister of Uganda, Right Honorable Dr. Rugunda, who opened this Singapore seminar. He managed to take time from his busy schedule to actually be here with us. So we really appreciate that. You can give So of course, as the norm with the AERC, whenever we have meetings, we make sure that there is rigorously generated evidence-based discussions. So of course, we had 5 presentations in this particular seminar, and so we'd like to really thank the presenters, all the presenters for the papers, for a wonderful job, and for helping to guide the discussion. So please, let's acknowledge our presenters. And of course, the presentations were edified by the very robust discussions that we had. So we also want to really thank the discussants. We also want to thank all the session chairs who really magnificently guided the discussions through the sessions. And of course, we also want to thank everybody who is in this room who came in for this workshop. So let's give a hand of applause for ourselves. So just for your information, we actually have participants from over 20 African countries in this room, which is again great. So we really thank you for honoring our invitations. Because obviously, if you don't honor our invitations, we cannot have a successful Singapore seminar. So I think it's very, very important, and we really would like you to encourage even your colleagues so that in the future when we invite them, they will be happy for them to honor our invitations. And of course, I would like to thank also the AERC board members who are present here, and beginning with the board chair. Of course, we have Dr. Lotia, and of course, we have our executive director. So thank you very much for the leadership and the guidance. Yes, and of course, the commissioner who is incoming. So we really thank you, and of course, we hope you will continue to give your wisdom and guidance to this organization. So we thank you very much. And of course, we would like to also thank the media people present. And of course, we want to thank the colleagues from UMAC who have been with us for the last 2 days. And of course, we have been partnering in several other events. And we thank you for a very good work that you are doing in support of this organization. And of course, we would like to thank the staff of the Bank of Uganda. They have been very, very helpful supporting the AERC staff. So we really want to thank for them for those efforts. Of course, there's also the staff of the hotel. They have been very helpful, making sure that everything that we wanted to make sure that this is very successful was actually organized. So we want to thank the hotel staff very much. And of course, we also don't want to forget AERC staff. I think usually when you see things going on smoothly, it feels like, wow, this thing is just easy to put together. But I can tell you that it's actually not that easy. A lot of challenges along the way, but a lot of teamwork also from the AERC group. And we make sure working as a team that we manage to actually deliver this Singapore seminar. And of course, we are very honored that this is the last SPS for Lema as the head of AERC. And of course, it has gone on very well. So of course, as the staff, we are very, very happy about that. So let's thank the AERC staff, the hotel staff, NUMA, and others. The type of them. So last but not least, of course, I want to thank the African Development Bank. In fact, yes, I think he did mention yesterday, this project, the Regional Integration Project, which is the background of the source of these papers, is supported by FDB. And of course, even the Singapore seminar itself is also partly supported by the FDB. So we're very thankful to the African Development Bank for supporting us. So in terms of the way forward, I have a few sort of announcements. So the first is that the papers, so there will be a seminar proceedings that will be published. And so Charles is the person who is really running with this. And of course, a policy brief will be developed following the discussions that we've had. And of course, the seminar papers will also be published. So again, Charles will be following up with the authors for them to submit the papers for publication. And lastly, well, not lastly, but so there will be the community will also be distributed widely to all those relevant institutions and persons. And of course, I think as you know from the program, there is a sort of exception after this, I think it's 6 p.m. 6 p.m. yes. So of course, we really would like to see everyone there so that we can have the time to mingle and sort of network. So with that, I want to thank you very much. And of course, wish you all a safe travel when you travel. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, SPS is formally adjourned. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, I think we made one commission. I forgot to thank the interpreters. They did a fantastic job. Yes. So yes. Thank you.
Okay, I just have 3 announcements to make. One is kindly those who are departing, be ready 3 hours ahead of time at the lobby so that we arrange your first time thereafter. 2, please visit Ballroom 1 for the resident participants. I see Sheila there for invitation. Then 3 cocktail will be at the poolside from 6 o'clock. Poolside, swimming pool. Poolside. 6 o'clock. Thank you very much.